My name is Lena Camilletti, and I'm an engagement journalist serving the opioid use disorder community. It's important that I'm upfront with you about my motivation to serve this community because of just that. I have a motivation and determination to make a positive impact and improve the lives of people affected by this disease. When I was 11, my parents told me that my older sister Angela would be moving home from college to be on house arrest for drug-related charges, and I was thrilled. I was incredibly happy because to me, this just meant that my big sister was going to be home and she'd have to hang out with me all the time because she wasn't allowed to leave. It wouldn't be until a few years later when she overdosed and died that I would begin to understand what it means to have opioid use disorder and drug-related charges, and the privilege that it is to be placed on house arrest rather than sentenced to jail. Terms like heroin and heroin addict were used to describe what my sister Angela was experiencing, but her opioid use disorder was never treated as a choice, always as a disease. Although my parents and Angela were still engaging in that self-stigma unknowingly, because the language that they were using was reducing my sister's experience to shame, because that is the tone that society set for people that were affected by this disease. Empathy was completely sparse. We can exercise empathy and want to make a positive impact on a community while integrating traditional journalism ethics and practices. And I know that this may sound like advocacy, but the project that I helped to develop actually bridges an information gap, and one that exists in part because of the failures of traditional journalism approaches. Just over a year ago, Maddie Linsenmeyer died as a result of opioid use disorder, and her sister, Kate O'Neill, wrote an incredibly humanizing obituary, which was published by 7 Days, a Burlington, Vermont-based publication. It actually ended up going viral, and it reached people all over the world, inspiring others to share their own stories of love and grief and recovery. And also, people were moved to start thinking differently about substance use disorder because of this humanizing obituary. In January of this year, 7 Days hired Kate to write a year-long series called Hooked, Stories and Solutions from Vermont's Opioid Crisis. And that's when deputy publisher Kathy Resmer, who's watching from the live stream right now, proposed a related project, an online memorial for opioid use disorder. And that's when she hired myself and Claire Skogsberg to help to develop what is now All Our Hearts. The stories that are published on this website are told in the words of people who have lost a loved one to this disease. The intention is to awaken empathy and also offer a moment of healing for the people that are sharing these vulnerable stories, and ultimately to inspire action. Claire and I were responsible for creating what now serves as an initial interview for individuals sharing their story with us. We met with community members who work directly with the opioid use disorder community and developed a set of prompts that aim to learn who a person was at their core, who they were before they experienced opioid use disorder and through it. After several rounds of editing and a couple weeks of user testing, we were able to gather 3 stories with the launch of the forum in August. Shortly after, in September, 7 Days went ahead and launched allourhearts.com, which is where we continue to gather stories and publish them today. All Our Hearts has been featured in BuzzFeed, Boston News, and also The Observer, which is a West Virginia paper from my hometown that gave me my very first job in journalism. We have logged more than 120,000 page views, and we've collected more than 60 stories from across the United States. Here are some of the stories that we've told and people that All Our Hearts has affected.
Emily, I turn mountains into valleys if it would bring you home. And I'd sell all of my possessions just to know you weren't alone, but I can't go. Where are you gone?
So for my practicum, I proposed to Kathy that I take over the community engagement aspect of this project. About 13 years ago, a young Vermonter, Sam Cohn, tragically died unrelated to opioid use disorder. And every year, his friends and family get together to make something called Sam Stones. On one side of this clay stone is Sam's name, and on the other is a website. And so they take these stones to new towns, cities, and even countries and leave them in random spots for strangers to find. And so when somebody finds this stone and they go to the website, what they find is Sam's legacy. And so we worked with John Cohn, Sam's dad, to develop our own version of this for all our hearts. In order to do this, I planned 2 events, and the first one took place on November 9th. It was here that we invited families who initially shared stories with us to gather and work with the clay to mold them into hearts. And on one side, we had our website address, while on the other, we invited them to personalize it, be it with a name, initials, or anything that reminded them of their loved one. Altogether, we made 200 stones that day between 8 of us, and we worked on them for about 3 hours. My parents joined me for this event, which made it very special, and my mom actually reflected on it 2 days ago in Burlington.
And I have to say, it was so therapeutic, as he and I never grieved together. We never grieved our daughter together. And it was as if Angela was guiding our hands.
Slowly past those sullen stairs between our classes, I don't know whoever really forgave me, but Emily.
Our second event that I planned took place in part, with an incredible 7 days team. Honestly, they're phenomenal, and I don't deserve them. So we planned this event, and it was where we really shared our project with the community. We had an interactive aspect, which allowed them to show us how this project has impacted them. And we also invited family members to speak about what it felt like to share a story with us. This matters because it's a public health crisis. It matters because it claimed my sister's life. And it matters because opioid use disorder can happen to anyone. And if we don't actively work to better understand this community that is ultimately our community, our friends and family will continue to struggle. Our perception of opioid use disorder as a society has a direct impact on treatment approaches, access to treatment, patient care, and recovery resources. But most importantly, it impacts an individual's ability to feel worthy of treatment and care at all.
We shame them, we continue to call the choice. We will not pave the way for their success. Addiction is a disease. It can be treated. It has nothing to do with failure, with sin, with weakness, or being less than a whole person.
I didn't realize how much stigma affected me. The New York Times, they had gotten in touch with this young man, Andrew, who found Brennan. And the New York Times called me and he said, we wanted to talk to you about your son who, had a heroin overdose. And I said, he didn't have a heroin overdose. I was like, I don't have the pathology report back. And he did have a heroin overdose. I said, until I see that in writing, no. And so I wasn't as brave, at that point.
In order for people to change, we have to live our loved one's story out loud.
It's never gonna be the same. Oh,
Those voices that you just heard were all people that have lost a child to opioid use disorder. And they were actually speaking to city council members, the mayor of Burlington, and state legislators. The people that can make a decision that can directly impact this community. The most important part about having the opportunity to pursue a degree in social journalism is that I have made an impact through listening, observing, and learning to hold myself accountable in a community that I am so very much part of. This program has taught me the importance of giving myself permission to be an empathetic storyteller while remaining an honest and ethical journalist. And through this program, aside from learning incredible skills and engagement, something we did last fall is what launched me to where I'm going post-grad. We were verifiers for ProPublic as Election Land, which then allowed me to move on to NBC National News to be on the social news gathering team, and I've now accepted a full-time position at ABC National News, which I'll begin at next Monday. This program allows you to become a well-rounded journalist far beyond the surface. And Guys, I was on script just until then. All of this is to say, social journalism is not about meeting a deadline. It's about recommitting to the humanity that we wanted to serve in the first place, our community, and being the voice for them. Thank you.